It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Like, there's been a few weeks in a row where I've just been like, no, not today. I don't want a parent. I don't want an adult. I don't want to do anything today.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
So last week, I had the opportunity to do some awesome stuff. I haven't done it properly for a long time, but last week it felt so good. 3 talks, corporate events. In fact, all 3 of them in Brisbane. One of them was to a bunch of tradies, a bunch of men who were involved in some group to help them to be better business owners, but there's a whole lot of personal development stuff in there as well.
I believe all their names were Ken.
So, and that's what I was going to say. I jumped onto Facebook. For those of you who missed it, I think this is kind of funny, but I accidentally made a typo on Facebook. I was so pleased. I was so proud of the fact that I was standing in front of a room of men. We were talking about fatherhood, and it was a meaningful conversation. I took a selfie in front of all the guys, and I said, a privilege to talk to a room full of Ken about fatherhood. And, oh, man, Facebook just went nuts. But everyone started talking about, well, when can we do the next convention? And it'd be great to have a conversation, and it was a lot of fun. But one thing that really struck me, and it's something that I've been struggling with as well, is just how tired everyone says that they are, especially when it comes to parenting. Like, having kids in 2022 is a tiring thing. And it made me go back to the webinar I did a couple of weeks ago. We did a big free webinar. There was a couple of thousand people that were there. The webinar was called Burnt Out. And I thought we should talk about that webinar today because it seems really appropriate.
Well, while I didn't get to participate in it, the conversations you and I had following it were quite alarming when you think about just how much parents are struggling right now.
Yeah, let me ask you some questions. And if you listen to the podcast and you can play along with a pen and paper, grab a pen and paper and let's just have a look at the answers to these questions. So you're scoring these questions on a scale from 0 to 6, where 0 is never, 1 is a few times a year, 2 is once a month or less, 3 is a few times a month, 4, once a week, 5, a few times a week, 6, every day. Okay, so increasing severity. 0, not severe at all. 6, like this is happening all the time. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, now we haven't prepared this. You don't know what's coming, but you're going to do this out loud and we're going to see how burned out you are as a parent. This is known as the Parental Burnout Assessment. You can find it online. I feel completely run down by my role as a parent. What would you score yourself? Remember, it's not intensity as in, oh my goodness, yes I am, but rather how often do I feel completely run down by my role as a parent?
I'd say probably a 2.
Yeah, I reckon I would as well. I kind of feel like it's not an everyday thing, but lately I feel like I'd actually say maybe once a week. Like, there's been a few weeks in a row where I've just been like, no, not today. I don't want a parent. I don't want an adult. I don't want to do anything today. Number 2, when I get up in the morning and have to face another day with my children, I feel exhausted before I've even started.
That's probably a 3.
Okay, so I can't blame the kids for this. I'm going to say 6. I'm exhausted every day, but that's on me, right? It's my exercise. It's too much work. It's the fact that I get up at 4:30. That's my fault. So in terms of the kids, I have to say that's probably 0, never. I don't think that I feel that way about the kids. The next one, I'm so tied up by my role as a parent that sleeping doesn't seem like it's enough.
Probably a 1.
Number 4, I have 0 energy for looking after my children. When do you feel like that? How often?
Probably once a month. That would be a 2.
Okay, jot it down. Those 4 answers, what's your total there?
8.
Okay, so that's 8 out of a possible 24, which is a kind of, it's nice and low. It's where you want it to be. Keep track of that number 8. We're going to add to that in just a sec. But we call that parental exhaustion. That's what we call the parental exhaustion scale as part of the parental burnout assessment. I know there's a lot of words here. Let's go on with number 5. I don't feel like I'm the good mum or dad I used to be to my children. How often do you feel like that?
Probably a 4.
Wow, really? You feel like you used to be better? See, I feel the other way. I know that I'm not getting it perfectly right, but I feel like I'm getting it right better than I've ever gotten it in my life.
The thing that I struggle with these surveys is the wording isn't necessarily how I would put it.
Well, that's because they're psychometrically put together
I know,
intentionally.
and it messes with my mind.
Just jot down the number, jot down the answer.
4.
Okay, so you're so funny. You sound cranky about it. The next one, I tell myself I'm no longer the parent that I used to be.
Oh, probably 0.
Okay, good. Write it down. Number 7, I'm ashamed of the parent I've become.
0.
Okay, super. I'm not myself anymore when I'm interacting with my children.
0.
Okay. So what we're talking about here, and there's one more here, I feel like I've lost my direction as a mum or dad.
0.
Okay. What we're talking about here is a contrast of previous parental identity. In other words, we're saying over time, the burnout has got me so uptight and so messed up that I'm not where I used to be. I've gone backwards. And what you're saying with your responses there is you're actually getting better as a mum. You don't feel like you're not who you used to be because over time you've gotten better at that.
No, and I guess if I went back to that first question, because you said used to, and I was probably just thinking more along the lines of today I'm not doing great.
Gotcha. Okay, so you'd have a lower score again.
I would definitely have a lower score.
All right.
Now that I've kind of got the idea, yeah.
Now we're at 48. What was your addition on top of the initial 8?
Well, it was 4, so I'm up to 12.
Okay, so you're up to 12. No problem. Let's go through the last few now. I can't take being a parent anymore. How often do you agree? How much do you agree? Never, a few times a year or less, once a month or less, a few times a month, once a week, a few times a week, or every day?
Probably a 1. A few times a year, it just gets too much.
Yeah, I'd probably go. I'm right there with you. You're not human if you say never. The next one, I don't enjoy being with my children. You're going to say the same thing, aren't you? Every now and again, you're like, yeah, I don't want to be with you right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I don't think you can be human and not have at least a 1 there. Next one, I can't stand my role as mother or father anymore.
That would be a 0.
Okay, let's jot that one down. And those 3 are our third factor, and that has to do with that parental identity and enjoyment of the role. So you've got a very low addition to your score now. And the last couple of questions we've got, I do what I'm supposed to do for my children, but nothing more. How much do you agree?
That would be 0.
The next one, I'm no longer able to show my children how much I love them.
0.
And outside of the usual routines, like lifts in the car and bedtime and meals, I'm no longer able to make an effort for my children.
0.
Okay. So overall, we've got 15 questions that are worth 6 points each. We can have a total score of 90. What's your total score there?
14.
Quick maths. 14 out of 90. You know what that says? It says you're not very burnt out at all when it comes to being...
So I should have more energy than I have?
Yes, that's what it's exactly what it says. My score would have been about the same as yours. I feel as though, in spite of all the pressure, the fact that we've got so many kids running a business, and all of the current economic dramas that are engulfing everyone on the planet and especially in Australia, I feel like my score would be around about the same as yours. Here's what the average is. When we look at the data from around the world, mums on average score 27.5. So you're well below average. You're kicking goals, Mrs. Happy Families. And dads normally score about 20.34. So that's a big deal because that means mums are more burnt out than dads because there's so much more in the trenches, right? Dads don't carry that cognitive load. They don't get as burnt out around family stuff. But check this out. In a 2-parent family versus a single-parent family versus a blended family, have a listen to the averages. For a 2-parent family, the average is 25.27. For a single-parent family, the average is 28.87. And for a blended family, where a couple of families have come together post-separation and divorce, 30.44. In other words, you're more likely to be burnt out when you're single than being in a 2-parent family, but you're even more likely to be burnt out if you're in a blended family where you've got everybody kind of trying to do the juggle and mixing one family with another.
Yeah, well, everybody in a relationship recognizes the challenges you have when you come together from 2 totally different backgrounds, but there's this romantic love there that kind of forges you together to work through it.
But it's hard.
But you bring 2 families together.
Yeah.
Then we're not just talking about 2 people now who love each other.
And you also bring your exes and you bring the double lots of in-laws and I mean there's a lot there. Check this out, children with additional needs. If you're in a family where there's children with additional needs, that average goes up to 34.3. If you've got additional needs, the average goes up that much. If you don't have kids with additional needs, it's 24. And kids under 5, the average is 28.75. Kids over 5, it drops down to 22. If you're in a single parent or a blended family and you're a mum and you've got kids with additional needs that are under 5, scores are off the charts. Now, the reason I wanted to go through that, and I know it's a bit laborious if anybody's listening and kind of going, oh, I'm not hanging on to this here. We've got 70% of the population that are scoring in category 1, which is where they have 2 or 3 of the symptoms a few times a year. So that would be your score. That would be my score. That would be most of the population are kind of hanging in there okay, 70%. But Category 2, 3, 4 and 5, where it's happening once a month or less, a few times each month, a few times each week, or every day, that takes up the other 30% of the parent population, where we've got a full 11% having this experience of burnout a few times each week or every day. Big numbers when you think about how many people are parents. Really, really massive. It's kind of like I imagined that it was going to be awesome, and it's not, and I'm falling apart. When I asked parents to jump into the chat, Kylie, and tell me what their scores were, I was overwhelmed with scores 50 and above. In fact, many scores were 70 and above.
Wow.
So what I'm hearing when people jump onto a free webinar about being burnt out and they start answering questions in a questionnaire like that is that these scores are off the charts. If you've just done that little survey yourself and you're scoring above 50, legitimately you need to go and get some help. Have a talk to your doctor, have a talk to a psychologist, have a talk to a social worker, have a talk to your mum, have a talk to your neighbour, talk to someone, because you really do need help. Those scores are terrifying. And if you're scoring in the 70s, that signifies that you need more than a little bit of help, and it's so important that you're able to get hold of that help.
Obviously, we've got children who are much older now. We've kind of almost successfully got 3 children
We've
to
got 3
adulthood.
adults. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so in the early days of parenting, I distinctly remember being in that place, just so hard and feeling like I was failing every day because there was so many big emotions within myself, within my kids, and just my perception and my, I guess, romanticized notion of what mothering would look like and what a happy family would look like were completely obliterated most days of the week. And I guess being able to go through this and score where I have, I hope sends a message of hope that as our children grow, our ability to see the joy and find purpose and meaning in the things that we're doing becomes easier, but it doesn't happen without intention.
That's what I was going to say. It only gets easier if you practice it. If you literally sit down and say, all right, what do I need to do? How do I do this better? Where did I fall this week? How can I pick myself up and do better with that next week? So I want to actually put in a shameless plug. We don't do a lot of plugs on the podcast for the stuff that we do elsewhere. But if you have listened to what we've been talking about and thought, yeah, I am a bit of a hot mess, my scores are a little bit too high, I want to just take the next 2 or 3 minutes and talk about the upcoming Happy Families Hot Mess Summit, because this thing is going to be amazing. It's happening this weekend, a full day of some of the best experts in the world talking about some of the best content in the world to help your family to not be so burned out and to help you to thrive. Can I tell you a little bit about who's going to be here, Kylie?
You have got one of the best lineups I've seen in a long time.
So I'm going to start with the celebrity superstar power. First off, we've got Amanda Keller, who has been a breakfast host and TV host and is one of the most powerful women in Australian media today. Amanda Keller has 2 boys who have just left home in the last couple of years, and our conversation is going to be all about her IVF story, the years and years that took for her to get kids, and then the challenge of raising them when she wanted them so much, but they drove her up the wall. She's the kind of person who makes you cry every time you hear her talk about parenting. So we've got her and Jessica Rowe, who is a self-confessed crap housewife. Her Instagram is full of her giving the kids baked beans and eggs on toast for dinner and burning the sausages because she's not interested in being an awesome housewife. And we're going to talk about her anxiety, her depression, her mental health diagnoses, and how you can still thrive and flourish, be happy, and have mental health challenges, as well as dealing with the issues that come with raising a couple of teenage girls. We're going to talk as well with Amy Taylor Kabbaz, who was an ABC journalist. She's now the author of Mama Rising and talks about matrescence, which was something that you loved about her book when we talked about it in book club, when we did our book reviews a few months ago.
Yeah, I just love this idea that as mothers, we kind of get thrown in the deep end when we fall pregnant and we have children, and we think that we should have it all together from day one. And the reality is matrescence is this wonderful gift.
It's like adolescence.
Of recognising it's a stage of life that we actually grow through.
We're going to talk with Ian Kerner. So Ian Kerner has written a couple of not safe for work books, a couple of books that you probably don't want the kids to pick up until they're a little bit older. One of them is called So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex, and the other one is called She Comes First. He is one of the world's leading sex therapists, and he's going to talk to me about what you can do if your love life is a bit of a hot mess, if your intimacy, your time with your spouse or partner isn't quite where you would like it to be. Who else have we got in here? Oh, we've got a Gottman-trained relationship specialist, Trish Purnell-Webb. She's going to talk about what John Gottman's work can do to help us to create stronger relationships with our partner. So we've got sex and relationships for the grown-ups and a whole lot of parenting. My mentor, Professor H. Wallace Goddard. Wally is going to join us to talk about discipline and getting limits right. We've also got Dr. Shefali. So, how could I forget?
I was about to say.
Oprah's parenting expert. She's going to talk, you know what, everything she talks about is going to be great. I'm not even going to go there. And somebody else that, a number of people have jumped online and said, I can't believe you got Chelsea Pottenger. Chelsea Pottenger is great. This is a lady who had it all, went into a massive state of depression following the birth of her daughter, and has pulled herself out of it and inspires people around the globe. She's one of the world's most sought-after keynote speakers. And she's going to spend time telling her story, but also sharing ideas about how we can be less of a hot mess, because she was she was institutionalized, completely and utterly suicidal. She was institutionalized and was in hospital for a long time before she was able to pull herself out of it with a lot of help and get her life back on track. And now she's she's literally one of the world's leading keynote speakers. Hot Mess Summit.
Well, you can't forget
Michaeleen Doucleff, Hunt, Gather, Parent, the author of one of my favourite parenting books this year. Don't agree with it all, but my goodness, it was such an inspiring and brilliant parenting book. And she's joining us for the summit as well. So, I mean, the quality of the presenters, the content that we're going to cover, if you haven't grabbed your ticket, it's on sale right now at happyfamilies.com.au. It's only $199. We've kept the price low instead of the $249 that it should be, but the sale ends really soon. The Hot Mess Summit is this weekend, and forgive us for using the podcast to just go on and on about it, but my goodness, we never do this on the podcast, and this is such a good summit. Plus, I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to finish it with a Q&A that night. So I've got a presentation first thing in the morning on Saturday, and then that night, I'm sorry I won't be home for dinner, because the Hot Mess Summit will continue through the night while I do a Q&A and answer people's questions about how they can be less of a hot mess based on everything that we're talking about during the day. Massive value, under $200. All the details are at happyfamilies.com.au.
Well, I know that you have a really hard time when we sit on the screen all day, but I think that you'll have a hard time getting me away from the screen come Saturday.
It's going to be really good. Oh, and the other thing is, if you can't make it, you can still buy it and we'll send you the replays. You can watch every single video at your leisure at a time that suits you, so that you can get full value. Even watch it with your spouse or partner. The Happy Families Hot Mess Summit, it's this Saturday. All the details are at happyfamilies.com.au. Thanks for allowing us to indulge a little bit and share that. I'm only doing it because I really think that the value is there to make a difference, especially if you're scoring high on that parental burnout assessment. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon for Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And for more information about all the stuff we talked about today, please visit us on our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families, or at happyfamilies.com.au.